So good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for showing up. We'll get into presenting you guys in a minute, but the first thing that I wanted to say is one sees this title and says Polkadot Ledger app, right? How is this a news to share? And the truth is that there's a lot to unpack. What we're doing here, what the Zondax team actually built with this app is quite remarkable, and that is what we're going to try and dismember today. So before we get started, I want to give you an opportunity to present yourself. So maybe Juan, if you want to go first.
Okay, yep, so.
Yeah, I think it's working, huh? Just put it closer to your mouth.
Okay, yeah, that was easier. So yeah, my name is Juan. I'm the CEO at Zondax. Yeah, as we will discuss today, we have been working with Ledger and Parity like along this process to get this thing being finished and accomplished. So, yeah.
Thank you. Victor?
Hello everyone. So my name is Victor. I'm working as a product manager at Ledger. So my mission is to highlight your guys, your development guys, because at Ledger we have an open platform and we want developers to build on top of our stack to provide secure applications for users so they can sign safely their transaction on any chain basically.
Good, thank you. And that's a very good segue into how I wanted to start today. So my idea for today is to discuss a little bit like what happened until now, how was the state of Polkadot and Ledger apps in general, what were the issues, the barriers, and the things that we encountered along the process, right? You're building the apps, you're releasing the apps, and these things. Then we want to talk a little bit about how is this different, how this was built, and then try to understand what are the benefits from the users, right? But before we dive into that, the other thing that I wanted to share with everybody is that the very interesting thing for me about this is that this is something that has been a true community development, right? This was something that the community brought up as a big issue. Hey, we need to be able to securely sign across the entire ecosystem. As we all know, Polkadot is a very intricate ecosystem in itself. It's quite advanced to what other ecosystems can present. So the Zondax team came here with a very interesting design and said, hey, wait, there's ways we can get this done, right? And we can figure out a way. And then, long story short, we presented this into the Polkadot Treasury. The Treasury funded it. The Zondax team developed it. And here we are today and being able to talk about this. So let's go back into the beginning, right? How was it before? Like, what happened, not 1 year ago, 3 weeks ago, right? What was the status of the Ledger app in the ecosystem?
Well, 3 weeks ago, yeah, it has been a long way. I mean, just before, I mean, I have to say it's not fully fair to say that it was like only Zondax design. I mean, there was a lot of people involved in the fellowship. There was like some previous work. This has been like kind of an ongoing effort for quite a long time, and it has been very collaborative. Even like alchemologists did some like early research.
Fair.
So the main thing is that since even pre-mainnet Kusama days, because of how Polkadot was designed, I mean, we had to kind of like build a lot of different apps. There were like a lot of things. Polkadot was one of the first chains that had this kind of distinct thing. They were like having runtimes that were like being upgraded by governance. So that meant like very frequent updates. That meant a lot of work on the development side, but also we were like pushing constantly things to Ledger, kind of like high cost, like a lot of like kind of like constantly work being done on Ledger to release things on time. Every now and then there were like hiccups because obviously Polkadot is super active. There have been like a lot of runtimes that went like, I don't know, from one day to the other, new kind of like creative stuff or even bug fixes, and we have to react very quickly, then push that to Ledger and ask like, I don't know, guys, please ship this on Friday because funds will be blocked on Monday or stuff like that. So that was before. At the same time, initially it didn't seem like a big deal because it was like Kusama, Polkadot, and some initial work. But then crowd loans came over, and then it was like nightmare. I mean, suddenly we have to deal with like, I don't know, 20 things. Initially, we could have some predictions, all like when runtimes were going to happen, but with parachains, they were all out of sync. So we were like sending like, I don't know, stuff like, I don't know, 4 times a week, or it wasn't never clear. Very kind of reactive. So we were on reactive mode, Ledger was on reactive mode. It was like a bit chaotic. I mean, chaotic in a good way. It was working, but too much work.
Yeah, fair.
And then there was a point where things started to get like bit more kind of like complicated. Also, bear market meant that we need to kind of like be more kind of like cost sensitive. Every time all these upgrades meant audits, so there were like additional costs that was like translated directly to auditors. And the main point at this stage was, okay, how we can actually do that. This has been like kind of an ongoing problem for Polkadot and for many other ecosystems. There were like multiple things that have been tried, and there are like some good new things like coming up now. But at the end, we wanted to have something that was like on chain, then that triggered like more research, and then we end up like last year kind of like closing design that was like kind of like good. And yeah, and then to be honest, we have been like presenting apps multiple times with different levels of like complexity.
Exactly, yeah.
But the last, as you say, 3 weeks or the last 2 months have been like very hectic because there were like some subtle things. Software is software. We need to change stuff. So we have to change a lot of things like last minute, and also get, thanks to you and Parity, but particularly like you, a lot of like coordination with a lot of things in the ecosystem, from DAS, wallets, and a lot of like stakeholders that had to upgrade. And yeah, we recently launched. It has been like quite good. Again,
Yeah,
there are
software
like
is software,
hiccups
yeah.
here and there. And this is not finished because now it went live in a few chains, but now you have parachains that will need to start like kind of migrating, and that's kind of like future challenge for the next 3 months. Hopefully 3 and not 6. But yeah, that's a bit
Fair
of
enough.
the story.
Yeah, fair enough. So you said one thing there that I wanted to pick up on, right? So Polkadot has this very unique thing. Polkadot and its parachains, right, have this very unique thing of being able to upgrade the runtimes, right? So you can change the logic of the runtime as much as you want, which is something that does not exist on other ecosystem, right? Other ecosystem need to just fork their nodes and be able to continue with new logic on their nodes, right? And this made it so that Polkadot at the beginning was trying to find a lot of like market fit and doing a lot of like upgrades into what it was doing, and the patches were doing the same. So you said we're sending like around 4 apps per week to Ledger.
He can probably confirm
Yeah, exactly.
that. But
So I wanna listen for you, Victor. Put us into context. What does 4 apps per week mean, and how it worked for you, like with the previous state that we had working with you guys?
Yeah, maybe not for a week, but a lot. It's true that at Ledger we couldn't keep the pace with the runtimes because Zondax they did a job, but on our side we put a strong emphasis on security. So we need to do all the checks that to make sure that the app is compliant with our guidelines and stuff. So it was really on our side. We were not really able to keep the pace with the runtime upgrade. So yeah, I think this new Polkadot app will make my life easier at least.
That's good.
I think this is a really great milestone for the Polkadot ecosystem and for Ledger users as well. So yeah, big shout out to Zondax, because I think that they did a great job in developing this new model of application. And I'm sure we will talk about it later. But
Yeah, let's get into that, right? So let's try to understand how is this even possible, right? So we're talking about this apparently magical app, right, that is resilient to runtime upgrades. So Polkadot and the parachains can continue upgrading whenever they want. It works on every single parachain out there, and the parachains can upgrade whenever they want, and this thing continues to work, right? But how is that even possible? How does it actually work?
how deep you want to go?
We have like 15 minutes left, right?
I mean, basically the main issue is that runtimes are a collection of kind of like a composition of something called palettes.
Yeah.
And these can evolve over time, or you can add or remove them, or they can be modified. And while Polkadot has some kind of like set of palettes, parachains will typically get that and compose something else on top of that. So there is a lot of like combinations. It's a kind of like complicated kind of like a thing, and at the same time versioning, because they can like introduce new things or remove things over time along at different times. So it's not all aligned. So this has been a kind of an issue like in lot of ecosystems, and there are like kind of like different ways. In this case, basically what we managed to do is that, and this was a whole thing that took several months to go through fellowship and a lot of people involved, is that the nodes can provide a complete description of the type system of all these palettes.
That's the metadata, right?
That's metadata, but metadata, I mean, and this is kind of the security model of Ledger. The thing is that you need to think that the computer has been compromised, and you want to be sure that the metadata is not coming from a hacker. I mean, it's coming actually from the node. So in a way, that there is a way of like proving that that metadata has been, is the actual metadata that is on chain, but the metadata is big, so there is a way to kind of summarize that to the minimum that is actually required for the device to understand the transaction. Then we show the transaction on chain, so we can, well, on the device, so we can show exactly what you are signing. That has been a problem that, I mean, last year we had like a long discussion with like other teams, like blind signing or not blind signing, and this has been an ongoing topic for a long time. The thing is, now you get the summarized version of all the types, so you can show what you're signing, and then what you sign is somehow, in certain ways, linked to the actual node metadata. So in a way, the metadata is provable, and then there is no kind of like man in the middle, or even like any centralized authority that is like kind of like coordinating that. The chain can do that online. Now, when there is an upgrade happening on change, that number, that proof changes, and then the app takes the proof and can like continue working. So as it was before, you have to change the app every time there was an upgrade. Now we don't need to do that anymore.
Exactly. So it seems like that the magical component here is this sort of like metadata, and making it, there is then two issues with the metadata, right? How can I fit into the security, the security things that Ledger asks me to do, right? So I need to always think that the metadata is compromised somehow. So I need to have that security threat in model. And the second one is I cannot fit the entire metadata on the Ledger devices because metadata is in the megabytes of size, and the Ledger devices can manage kilobytes of size, right? So like combining these two things is what you just said then. It's, okay, I'll send only the piece of the metadata that the user needs to decode that particular transaction. At the same time, within this transaction, I add this hash that represents the metadata, and then the node double checks. If this is okay, then the transaction succeeds. Otherwise, the transaction doesn't succeed because the metadata that was used to see that value or to see that transaction was compromised somehow, right? So it's very interesting. And if I'm getting this right, this does not only help with the runtime upgrades, but this is what also makes it usable within the entire ecosystem. Is that correct?
Yeah, correct. I mean, with a subtle thing there, like asterisk below, you need to use the latest SDK. So if you're a parachain and you want to kind of like profit from this new app, you need to upgrade your runtime. It's something that should be easy if you have been like catching up with like Parity and the Polkadot SDK and the fellowship kind of like improvements. And once you do that, then you can profit from the app.
Yeah, I'll remove my questioner hat. I'll put my Parity hat. I'm going to say, it's been backported almost to a version that's a year and something ago, right? So not even like needing to be updated to the latest. But what does this mean for Ledger users in general? What do you think?
For Ledger users, it will definitely ease the process a lot, the signing process, because as you said, Juan, in the past, users needed to have like several applications, like one application per parachain, basically. So now they will benefit from the Polkadot application only. So they will be able to, I mean, if the parachain does the particular runtime upgrade, but then the user will be able to use the Polkadot application only to sign every transaction on every parachain, basically. To do so, there is a little process. So they need to use the migration app that Zondax developed as well. So if you are a user of Kusama, for example, you need to first use the migration app to send your funds to Polkadot, if I say it in a simple way. And then you will be able to use the Polkadot app only, and you will sign your Kusama transaction, on every parachain, basically. So, and you can use it on, for the moment, Talisman, Subwallet, Nova Wallets, Ledger Live as well, and probably Polkadot.js in the future.
Coming soon. I can tell you because I talked to them yesterday. Again, Parity had again. I talked to them yesterday, and they're working on it to have it very, very soon. They already have a working version of it. But yeah, coming soon. I want to double down a little bit on what you said before about users having to use different app per parachains, right? Because I look into my Ledger device, right? And I see my different apps. But the Polkadot app of the past has always been kind of heavy, right? So if I had the Polkadot app, sometimes I couldn't even have another parachain app installed at the same time, right? So that meant that if I wanted to use Polkadot on a parachain, I had to use the Polkadot app, delete it, put the parachain app in,
That's
use
true.
it, delete it, and do that all over the place, right?
Yeah, that's even more true on the old device, the Nano S. Maybe not that true on latest devices, but still. And yeah, I think for users in general, it will be easier because they don't even need to install these applications. Because if you use a third-party wallet and not Ledger Live, for instance, you don't really know that you need like several applications to sign transaction on every parachain. So yeah, with the Polkadot app only, yeah, it will be simpler. Yeah.
Yes, maybe I need to just upgrade to Ledger Stacks, I guess. My Nano S, it's like they are like kind of dying, right? But yeah, anyways, I'll try and do that. Yeah, go ahead, please.
I can add something like very brief on that.
Please do, please do.
So the reason it was so big is because we could not verify what the metadata in the node was. So we were like somehow kind of like embedding the metadata in the code itself. So it was not really a big, like such a problem because of the device. Obviously, the device have been like kind of getting better and better over time. You should upgrade, like buy a new one.
Fair.
But the main thing is we could not trust the metadata on chain, so we have to kind of like almost manually get the metadata there, go through our audits. Now that's not a problem anymore.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, maybe, I don't know, Ledger has my address, maybe I get a Stacks on my house someday, right? But anyways, I'm just kidding. Don't put any pressure on that. So, yeah, exactly that, right? And I think that this makes sense, and this new app, as you said, Juan, is also like a very good way of being stable over time too, right? Not having to go through audits all the time, not having to bother Ledger all the time to rush through these releases. Maybe you also users that have this Ledger devices on their drawers, right? And they forget about it, and then they pick it up. This should be consistent over time. As you said, though, software is software, right? And everything can happen. And there's still more things to do on this, right? And I want to touch base on that a little bit now. But before we go into your sort of like answer into, okay, what's coming next with this, actually, let's do that first. So what do you think are sort of like next steps that we can take on this?
So that's a good question, actually.
Fair.
I mean, what I would like to come next, maybe.
Okay.
I don't want to make a strong commitment on.
Fair.
So, I mean, what is probably coming next, and it doesn't depend on us, is like parachains starting to get like more adoption, and everyone start to use that. That will like mean users upgrading and getting like consolidated into a single app, and life easier, Ledger happier, everyone happier. What comes probably like immediately after is that metadata has been designed for what we think and for what metadata is today. It will probably evolve. I mean, innovation happens, and so far, even though we have been like saying, okay, the app is generic, and I mean, you can always come up with something that is not included in the current design.
Yes.
There are a few subtle things that we are already aware of that didn't meet kind of like consensus and everything on by the time that the release was done. There are things in Asset Hub, like dynamic assets, that even though the metadata is a kind of like a snapshot of what the runtime knows at the point that runtime is published. But if during the execution of one runtime upgrade to the next one, someone is like I don't know, creating a smart contract, new assets, like things that are created, or those are not kind of transferred to the metadata. So having dynamic metadata, or dynamic verifiable metadata, is something that probably will happen. Same with like certain level of customization. The new Ledger devices, they may eventually support more languages or things like that. So those things are probably happening. And then there is a kind of like continuous improvement, like, okay, there are new firmware upgrades, there are new security things that Ledger kind of like introduce, or features, and that's also probably also happening. I have to still say that because they were like collaboration, like part of the collaboration and everything, there are like other guys like Campela that is also kind of doing some work. So this eventually, I don't know if they're going to kind of like do something or not. But yeah, that's in a way the transition. And the last thing that I want to emphasize is that this is also really good for air gap signing. And that was a big issue there that this also solved.
Correct.
things like, as you said, you put something like a ledger away for 3 months and later you want to sign, and you want to know that that works.
Yeah, exactly. Totally right. And I want to piggyback again on with my parity hat on this that you said for the very, very short next term, right? What the ecosystem should expect with this Polkadot app, because it is not necessarily true that now it works absolutely everywhere, right? The ecosystem still needs to do some upgrades, right? This new design of the app touches so many things within the ecosystem that things need to progressively upgrade, right? So we touched upon the parachain teams. So there's a guide there that Parity put out, that Basti wrote, that's about, okay, what changes you need to do to your runtime, what new dependencies you need to have to be able to calculate this metadata hash and whatnot. The other thing that needs to upgrade, for example, are applications themselves, right? So the way that Polkadot JS API works is not necessarily compatible with this calculating of a hash and making sure that we can do this right. So we had a lot of collaboration with other teams within the ecosystem as well to make sure that we can come up with a design that works. And now applications need to add some more information when they're sending payloads to be signed so that the wallet can add this hash that represents the metadata. And of course, the wallets need to upgrade as well to be compatible with this. So we're seeing a lot of progress. I think that the mostly used apps in the ecosystem are already there. But of course, maybe your favorite app still needs to be upgraded. If you find it, just nag them, let them know, hey, go look into the Parity forum. There's an explanation of how to do this, and they will get it done. It's not that difficult, but it needs to be done. So that's to set the right expectations. So yeah, any final words that you guys might say before we end this?
No, I just want to, again, give a bigger shout out to you guys because you did a really great job. On our side, we just made sure that the app was compliant with our guidelines, but it was really, the process was really smooth for us, at least. So yeah, congrats, guys.
Yeah, I mean, similar to what Victor said, I mean, like, excellent long collaboration. I mean, like, we were a lot very closely with Ledger, but at the same time, there was a lot of coordination and unexpected additional work because the ecosystem is much bigger than anyone can imagine. And for that, like Santiago was essential into kind of like coordinating and understanding how the network grows from, I don't know, changing this wallet means that some dApp somewhere has been affected. And okay, that's practically, I'm not sure that's finished. It will like continue, definitely, as you say, going, an ongoing effort. But yeah, I guess it was like kind of really nice, bit different from other projects that we've been involved in because it actually required a lot more coordination, but it was like really exciting. I'm happy to be kind of like at the end closing it.
Yeah, definitely. And it's definitely a learning process and we'll keep on learning things, right? As I said, we touched very like in-deep things that in the way that Polkadot and the ecosystem works that we've been discovering that started surfacing. So I guess some other things will pop up. As you always say, software is software, and as much we market this as the app, generic app everywhere, there's always an asterisk and a caveat to say. Yeah. But one thing that I like about this a lot with all this collaboration and everything is that for me, this project represents something that I would like to see more in Polkadot, which is the ecosystem bringing up problems, the ecosystem presenting solutions, the ecosystem funding this, and the ecosystem solving this, right? Because this truly shows how this ecosystem, when it comes together, is truly unstoppable. And I hope we see a lot more of that. So thank you guys very, very much for all your work and for everything that you did for this. I think it was crucial. And thank you for everybody involved in it as well. And with that, I guess we're done here.
Yep, thank you very much.
Any question?
Okay.
Yes.
That's a question.
We have time, please.
44 seconds, come on.
Thank you. It's a quick question. I just wanted to ask if there are any known parachain configurations that do not work with that setup. I know that for that sort of generic tooling, for example, parachains using non-U32 block numbers can sometimes not work. Do you know anything about that, for example?
I'm not sure about that, to be honest, but we can look it up. Yeah, I'm not so sure how to answer that question, to be honest. But I can take the next step to look into it. I'm not sure why it wouldn't work either, if that's the only thing.
Yeah, so if your types are exposing the metadata, it
that's
should
it.
be fine.
Yeah.
If they are part of the extrinsics, like maybe this is the case, kind of like outside of the kind of like call type system, maybe there are some things that need to be adjusted there. I mean, to be honest, it's true that this was designed for Polkadot and not for solo chains. So if you're a solo chain, maybe there are like some tweaks that need to be made.
Not a solo chain, but a parachain.
Yeah, but as long
Okay,
as it's
okay.
exposed by the metadata, it should work out of the box. But if you find these things, let us know. As said, this is a very intriguing thing, and we can definitely look into it for sure.
Thank you. Cool.
Welcome. Another question? Okay, we have last question. Only one.
Yeah, I have a question. So no blind signing is obviously great, but
Yes.
the other part of the story is that the user needs to understand what he's signing. And at least I haven't used Ledger because of the reasons we know, and I'm going to give it a try now. But like on parity signer, for example, the data is displayed. Sorry, on Polkadot Vault. But even for a developer, it's sometimes hard to understand what you're actually signing,
Yes.
right? Is there any effort in this area, like to improve the usability and make it comprehensible for like normal human beings what you're actually signing?
Yeah, if you want to, I can take this because we discussed it so many times as well. But when we looked at so we did the exercise of looking at different metadatas of different like parachains and relay chains or whatever, and the disparity is very, like it's very high, right? Some things you have like very interesting like description of this is what's the input here for this particular field and whatnot. Another was difficult to understand. But truth is that there's not a very straightforward solution for that unless we start seeing more and more with this and people understand how valuable it is for them to write things that are usable for users, right? But we cannot have an interface to change what the metadata says to what the user is seeing on Ledger itself. But we've been looking into that as well, and it's true that there are some times where it's not very clear what the field actually means because when it was written, it's exposed as X, right? It's what's X. But yeah, we'll potentially like try to identify these cases and raise it to the teams so they can make it to something that's more readable. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, that's just on that, like very briefly, but I didn't want to bring this up now because it's something that, as he was saying, it required a bit of like coordination. But eventually, we were like thinking about like having some kind of like custom formatters for certain types. So you can say, I want this type to be shown in that way, and you can annotate your metadata. But this is more like a possible RFC that will come up, and it needs to go through fellowship. And we didn't want to kind of like block this like another 6 months for this.